Hi, today we're going to use proportions to calculate the values in a series circuit. In this case I have a 120 volt source and it's got 4 resistors, R1, 2, 3, and 4. Total resistance in this circuit I can find by adding up all of the resistances. Now you have to be careful because when we look at Ohm's law, E equals I times R, one thing to remember is that each of these units is E is in volts, I is in amps, and R is in ohms. So when we see something that says 2000 ohms, we have to convert it to ohms before we can put it in our formula. Because I want to get my R total for this circuit and use it in an Ohm's law calculation, I'm going to take 2000, 4000, 6000, and 8000 and add them up, and it will give me 20,000 ohms as my R total. Now I have two numbers in my totals. 120 volts divided by 20,000 ohms will give me 0.006 amps. I'm going to write it down as 6 milliamps, but remember when I use it in the calculation I have to convert it back to just amps, so I'll be using 0.006 when I calculate it out. Now in a series circuit we know that I total equals I1 or equals I2, so at each one of these T's up here I can also put in 6 milliamps. Each one, all the way along, the current will be the same. Now I have two numbers at each one of my resistors, so I can go ahead and find the voltage. We know that E equals I times R, so 0.006 amps times 2000 ohms will give us the voltage for R1, which is 12 volts. I can do the same for R2. It's going to be 0.006 amps times 4000 ohms gives us 24 volts. We end up with 36 volts over here and 48 volts here on R4 by doing the same math. I need to double check and make sure that I've got my math right. So what I can do is, because I know that E total is equal to E1 plus E2 plus E3 plus E4, all of these voltages should add up to 120 volts because that's my source. And when I double check, they do. So I've done that correctly. Now here's where the proportions piece fits in. If I look at the total number of ohms for R1, it was 2000 ohms. The total ohms for the whole circuit was 20,000 ohms. When I divide this through, I see that this is 0.1, or 10% of the whole circuit is in R1. Interestingly enough, that if I divide 12 into 120 volts, so 12 volts is the voltage of R1, and 120 volts is the voltage of the whole circuit, I again get 0.1 or 10% of the circuit. We can do it for R2 as well. So R2 had 4000 ohms. The total resistance for the whole circuit was 20,000 ohms. When I divide that out, I can see that 4,000 ohms is 20% of the total resistance of the circuit. If I look at the voltage, 24 volts divided by 120 volts is also 20% of the whole circuit. So we can actually use a proportional method to find the voltage in a circuit.